The roar of the crowd was deafening, a thunderous wave crashing through the packed arena. Bright lights bore down on the ring, illuminating two figures standing across from each other. One, a legendary force of nature; the other, a warrior forged in the fires of modern combat. Mike Tyson, the name alone sent shivers down spines. A man who once made the heavyweight division his playground. A fighter whose raw power and ferocity left opponents crumpled before they even had a chance to fight back. Across from him stood Dustin Poirier, a technician of destruction, a relentless machine with precision and endurance honed by years in the octagon. Two worlds, two disciplines, two champions, but only one could stand victorious. No one thought this fight would ever happen. The combat sports world had always debated it, throwing theories around like jabs in a crowded gym. What if Tyson, in his prime, fought an elite mixed martial artist? Could he handle the kicks, the clinch, the relentless pressure? It was nothing more than barbershop talk, fuel for late-night arguments. But then, the unthinkable happened. An offer was made, one too good for either man to refuse. And now, under the bright glare of the world's eyes, Tyson and Poirier stood in the ring, not for a hypothetical debate, but for a fight that would rewrite combat sports history. Tyson's eyes burned with a familiar hunger. Even in his later years, there was something in his presence that made opponents hesitate, a primal aura, a reminder of the fear he once instilled. Age had softened his features, but not the fire inside him. He had trained for this like a man possessed, revisiting the same brutal intensity that made him a legend. On the other side, Poirier was unmoved, a man who had stared down killers in the cage and lived to tell the tale. He was a warrior in his own right, but this was different. This was not the octagon. There were no elbows, no takedowns, no submissions, only fists. And Tyson's fists had made men question their life choices within seconds of standing in front of him. The energy in the arena was suffocating. Fans from both sides filled the seats, some there to witness a piece of history, others to settle long-standing arguments. Was boxing the superior discipline, or could an elite MMA fighter adapt and dismantle a legend in his own realm? The stakes weren't just legacy and pride. This was a battle between two philosophies of combat, a collision of two eras. The bell hadn't even rung, yet the tension felt like it could snap steel in half. As the referee stepped between them for final instructions, Tyson's lips curled into a knowing smirk. It wasn't arrogance, it was recognition. He saw something in Poirier, something familiar. A fighter's spirit, one that had been tested in fire and never wavered. But recognition wasn't hesitation. The moment that bell rang, all pleasantries would vanish. There would be no feeling out process, no patience, only war. The official gave his final words and stepped back. The crowd's anticipation reached a fever pitch. This was it. Years of speculation, arguments, and hypotheticals were about to be answered. Tyson took a deep breath, rolling his shoulders loose. Poirier narrowed his gaze, shifting slightly, already calculating angles. The bell was seconds away from ringing. And then, the bell rang, and Tyson exploded forward like a coiled spring, a lifetime of muscle memory firing at once. His footwork was sharper than anyone expected, his hands moving with a speed that defied his years. Poirier reacted on instinct, shifting to an angle, his body tense with the readiness of a man who had danced with danger before. The first punch came faster than he anticipated, a Tyson left hook that carried the weight of every opponent he had ever crushed. Poirier barely managed to slip outside, feeling the wind of it graze his jaw. It was a warning shot, a reminder of the power that had once made men crumble. Tyson pressed forward, not giving Poirier a second to breathe. He cut the ring off with a mastery honed through years of fighting the best boxers in the world. Poirier, used to a bigger space, felt the walls closing in. The canvas beneath his feet wasn't the same as the octagon, no fence to lean on, no room to reset. He pivoted, feinted, trying to create distance, but Tyson didn't bite. Another step forward, another right hand, this one barely missing as Poirier pulled his head back. He could feel the danger, the weight behind those fists. A single mistake, and he would be picking himself up off the mat. Then, something changed. Poirier, always known for his adaptability, stopped playing defense. A sharp jab snapped Tyson's head back, a test, a message. Tyson smirked but didn't retreat. Another jab, then a low dip like he was feinting a level change, a trick stolen from the world of MMA. Tyson flinched just slightly, and that was all Poirier needed. He stepped in and landed a crisp right hand, catching Tyson just above the eye. The crowd gasped. Not because it was the hardest shot, but because it was proof Poirier wasn't just here to survive. He was here to fight. Tyson's expression darkened. He had felt that before, fighters who thought they could trade with him. They always learned. His gloves came up, his shoulders rolled, and then he attacked with the kind of fury that made men question why they ever stepped in front of him. A right hand crashed against Poirier's guard, forcing him back. A second later, Tyson ripped a body shot that sent a ripple through Poirier's torso. Pain flared up his ribs, but he had no time to acknowledge it. Tyson was already launching another shot, this time a left uppercut aimed at the chin. Poirier ducked just in time, but he wasn't out of danger. Tyson's right hand was already coming down like a hammer. And then, in the chaos, it happened. A moment that no one saw coming. As Tyson's punch came down, Poirier reacted on instinct, throwing his own counter, a short right hand that clipped Tyson just above the temple. It wasn't devastating, but it was enough to throw off the rhythm. And in that split second, Poirier did something no one expected. His body shifted, his stance subtly changed, and in the blink of an eye, he lifted a knee. The crowd erupted in shock. A knee? In a boxing match? The referee was already stepping in, but it was too late. Tyson had seen it, had felt the motion, and for the first time in the fight, his eyes showed something new. Not fear. Not anger. But recognition. Poirier hadn't meant to throw it. His instincts as a mixed martial artist had taken over. He pulled it back at the last moment, but the damage was already done. Not to Tyson, but to the illusion of control. This wasn't just a boxing match anymore. This was something different. Tyson wiped his glove across his forehead, his breathing steady, his expression unreadable. Poirier exhaled sharply, realizing what had just happened. The referee gave a warning, reminding them both that this was a boxing ring. But the look in Tyson's eyes said it all. This fight had just changed. And now, it was about to get even more dangerous. Tyson took a step back, rolling his shoulders, his expression unchanged, but something in the air had shifted. That brief moment, the instinctive knee that never landed, had unlocked something primal in him. He had spent decades in rings, fighting men who knew the game, who played by the rules. But this wasn't just another fight. This was a collision of two warriors from different battlefields, and for the first time in a long time, Tyson wasn't just fighting an opponent. He was fighting an idea. The idea that his style, his world, could be overwhelmed by something newer, something faster, something more unpredictable. Poirier, still steady on his feet, met Tyson's gaze. He knew he had made a mistake. Not because of the referee's warning, but because of the effect it had on the man standing in front of him. The beast had been stirred, and now there was no room for hesitation. If he backed down even for a second, he was done. He reset his stance, took a breath, and stepped forward. The next exchange was nothing short of a storm. Tyson moved with a renewed intensity, his punches flowing like they did in his younger years, head movement sharp, footwork smooth, his power undeniable. Poirier adjusted, slipping, countering, refusing to get caught. A left hook scraped his ribs, forcing a grunt from his throat, but he answered back with a sharp cross that clipped Tyson's chin. The crowd roared. Then, in the middle of it all, something changed. Tyson stopped moving for just a fraction of a second, an almost imperceptible shift in his balance. Poirier saw it, recognized it, and knew this was his moment. He threw a combination jab, right hand, then a left to the body, aiming to break the rhythm once and for all. But Tyson had set the trap. The moment Poirier committed, Tyson unleashed a right hook with all the weight of his history behind it. It landed flush, a sound like a bat cracking against wood. Poirier's head snapped to the side, his legs betraying him as he staggered back. The ropes caught him for just a second before he dropped to a knee. The crowd exploded. The referee was already counting, but Poirier wasn't done. He blinked through the haze, shook his head, and forced himself back up before the count of 8. His legs were there. His spirit was unbroken. But Tyson knew. He could see it in the way Poirier held his gloves, the way he breathed. The fight was nearing its end. The final moments came in a blur. Poirier pushed forward, emptying the last of his reserves, knowing he couldn't afford to let Tyson dictate the pace. They traded like two men who had nothing left to lose, fists flying, sweat spraying with every collision. Then, in one final exchange, Tyson feinted a left hook and came over the top with a crushing right hand. It landed perfectly. Poirier's body reacted before his mind could. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the canvas. The referee stepped in, waving the fight off. It was over. Tyson stood in the center of the ring, breathing heavy, his gloves hanging at his sides. Poirier, groggy but conscious, sat up, nodding to himself, accepting the reality. It had been a war, a test of wills. And though he had fallen, he had proven something undeniable. He belonged in there. He had stood toe-to-toe with one of the greatest strikers in history and made him fight for every second of it. The two met in the middle of the ring, no words spoken at first. Just respect. Tyson reached out, pulling Poirier to his feet, whispering something only they would ever know. The crowd cheered, not just for the victory, but for the fight itself. The debate would continue: boxing versus MMA, old versus new. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was what they had given. As the lights dimmed and the night faded, one thing was certain: the world would remember this fight. Not for the outcome, but for the battle itself. And somewhere, in the endless discussions and debates that would follow, a new question would emerge: what happens next?